Right now, I'm staring at an article that you wrote for Tharawat Magazine a few weeks ago. And it was a very well-received article. I think it's the most popular article we ever published on the Tharawat Magazine website.
Yeah.
Ironically enough.
It did seem to hit a nerve with a lot of people.
Yes. And, well, I mean, it's called 5 Things You Should Know Before Joining Your Family Business. And so obviously, I'm assuming for family business readers, this meant a lot to them because it's very relevant to, I'm sure, what they're experiencing, what they're feeling. So let's kind of walk through the 5 things you should know before joining the family business. So once again,
to me,
yes, according to you,
according to me,
yes, and based on
your
very
biased opinion.
Yes, but in a way, this is also, if you went back 7 years ago, once again to young Ramya, and
you're gonna get so much crap for
yes,
this.
but it's I just got to throw that.
Yeah, I know.
And so you have these 5 things that young Ramya should know before working with her family. So let's walk through that. So the first point you make is you don't know your family. What do you not know about your family?
Well, okay, my whole the first piece of advice I give to people who tell me I'm about to join my family business is I tell them okay guys, you don't know these people. And they look at me what do you mean? And this is my family, I grew up with them. It's no. Choosing the family business does not mean choosing familiarity.
Yes.
This is not true. You know why? Because knowing people in their private setting and knowing people at work is a world of difference. Because we all project I'm not saying that essentially you're a different person with different values, but I'm saying our behaviors adapt to the circumstances.
Right.
So when I'm in a business context, I will behave in certain ways that will make me more maybe authoritarian in certain respects, or will make me more intolerant in others, whereby at home I would be totally soft about these issues and I wouldn't care and I would let it go past me.
Right.
So the first wrong assumption I think next gen members make, and in the positive and the negative by the way, is to think that they know the people that they're going to be working with just because they're family. You don't.
All right, so the second thing that you should know before joining your family business, as you write, is your family doesn't know you.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, right? So if you if you want to be successful in your family business from the get-go, the first point being don't expect to know who these people are in the workplace just because you know who they are at home. And the second point is make sure that doesn't happen to you either. So go in there and understand that there might be a mutual shock, so that they're going to be just as much shocked by your professional behavior as you are by theirs. So give that some time to sort of settle down and make sure that you don't slip into body language and expressions that are too familiar in the workplace. I find that sometimes useful to, you don't have to make it all stiff and stuff like that. Some of the familiarity is what makes it so fun and comfortable. But learn to draw lines at the same time. Where it's okay, so when it comes to work, we sort of don't fall into too many of the familiar family patterns, basically.
Yeah, right. All right, and the third thing that you mentioned is you don't know the business.
Yeah.
Isn't that a given? If you haven't worked at the business.
No, actually, because you see, if you look at most of the interviews we've done in the past, most of them start with, I've been going to the family factory for the last, since I was a little girl or a little boy. My parents used to take me to the office, or I used to be part of the family council since the age of 3. So there is this assumption, because we are proud of being part of the family business, or it's been useful to us in some shape or form, that we actually know what it's about. However, we can never forget, right? When we observe the family business from the outside, we do get a family perspective, whatever's said and done. It's when we're part of the owning family. Okay. So when you come into the business, get to know the business as a business. So don't see it as, first of all, your property, or only through the lens of the emotional attachment of the family, right? So this is a really big distinction to make, because you might be confronted with the fact that you come into your business and you realize, okay, well, it's great, there's this heritage and everything, but for instance, like, we're behind in certain things from a business perspective, or we should be streamlining, or we should be reducing costs, or on the contrary, like, we're extremely ahead of time in certain things, and that should be accentuated in communicating the business. So these are all things that I mean, like, it's actually the whole article, if you will, like all 5 points at the end of the day come down to don't be prejudiced, like, not towards the business and not towards your family members, and not towards yourself either.
Right. Yeah, you probably need that kind of perspective before you kind of come in, because you're right, based on certain assumptions, because it's not an extension of your family in the purest sense. It is a company and a business after all. So that's something that, you definitely need to look out for. And
always never forget, right? Okay, fine, this might be your family's business, and you might see it from the shareholder's perspective, but there are like tons of other people involved in running a company, right? Like, so this is not just your show. Like, this is something that involves many other people who you're responsible for. And so, like, setting that role model of, like, putting priority on things working well and fairly will pretty much guarantee that you're still going to be there in the long run, and that you also integrate well into the family business. Right.
And well, actually, the fourth point that you mentioned kind of ties in with that, and it says you will change your definition of success many times over.
Like many times. Like, James, like so many times.
Okay. So how many times for you?
Well, I think, like, for me, like, I think there were times where it probably changed on an almost weekly basis. Because, I think the way we define success in the family business, first of all, again, highly individual, of course, depends very much on the family. But sometimes, because of the long-term orientation of what we do, we define success maybe differently than the fast-paced environment that we live in nowadays, right? Like, so we are all extremely influenced by Silicon Valley companies and, like, generally, like, that kind of, like, sort of corporate thinking still, even though, like, we all know the consequences of too much of that sort of, like, inflatable behavior. But of course, it is in a way just more attractive to hear about, right? Like, so when you hear, like, about multi-billion buyouts, like, it gets you thinking that they're doing something right. However, like, when you look at family business models, like, very often what you see is that the success sort of is actually the other thing, the more quiet thing, whereby, like, you've managed to maintain 150 employees for the last, like, 50 years, right? And you've been able to grow consistently your market share by 2% every year. And, like, it's not exciting, it's not exponential, and it's certainly not very visible, but it's good business. So that is something, I think, where you just have to manage expectations towards yourself and towards the business. So you come in, and as a young member, you should come in with energy. You should come in with, like, tons of ideas, and you should pitch them all. But you have to understand that, like, it's not going to be about, like, how many of those you implement, but how well you understand what constitutes success for this particular family business and for yourself, and whether there's a match there. Because if in the long run you can't identify with the way the business of your family is successful or needs to be successful, then you might just be one of those people who are just not a match in their own family business, which, is actually totally okay as well, as long as you recognize it, right? So I always, like, emphasize that as well. Like, in my opinion, not everybody needs to go into the family business, like, at all. Like, it should not be like a given or a mandatory or like an entitlement for that matter.
And that in itself, of course, is also a definition of success, right? I mean, just because you are a member of the family doesn't necessarily mean that you're destined to take it over and, take it another, 40, 50 years. You might have somewhere else to go, and, your talents could be better used somewhere else. So that's not necessarily something that has to happen within the family business. And well, that takes us to the last thing that you should know before joining your family business, and it is you won't be able to separate work from emotions, so don't even try.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
It seems very wise, and
no, it's just my favorite. You know why? Because like it's just so true. See, but I actually think that it's true like in any workplace, any time. I think just the family sort of amplifies this because there's the family ties, but you know what? As long as you work with human beings, you're going to have to deal with emotions. And like, I agree. Like, I don't agree with this whole attitude of like, you know, bring everything from home to work. That is not your place. You're here to work and stuff like that. But I mean, you have people working together. There's bound to be stuff happening. There's bound to be emotions in the room. And I just think denying that is like borderline delusional. Like, I think just so, like, you know, that just doesn't make any sense. I mean, and I think in the particular case of the family business, I think like for a very long time, we've been taught to think that the successful family business is the one that keeps the emotions separate. And I think that has been a massive mistake, because instead of understanding and just accepting that those emotions are in the room and that we need to leverage on them and that we need to actually either confront them and put them in their place in a way that they don't interfere anymore, we've just said like, okay, if you're emotional, you can't be in the family board or you can't be in the family business.
Right, because it's going to lead to fights and it's unprofessional. So just keep that out of the workplace. But
and that's not possible. Right? Exactly. I mean, I'm sure you brought the example of your father before. I'm sure like, you know, he deals with plenty of emotions on a daily basis, even in a multinational. So I think what's really important is that you realize that there's going to be a huge amount of irrational remarks between family members in the workplace. It's just what it is. Like it's very, I mean, you will find it very rare that all the family members will exactly know how to deal with each other from the get-go. Like, you know, I mean, you'll get remarks like, I mean, I've heard it all. I think from my family as well as witnessed it in others, like, you know, parents who comment on their kids, the way that they've been, the way that they dress on the day that they have a board meeting, like, you know, even though they're like 35, 40, the kids, so like, you know, and they're like, stuff like that, like stuff that's totally inappropriate, but just like people slip into the family roles. Or sometimes I've also seen people at home slipping too much into the business role, where like, you know, the tone needs to change sometimes. I have a lot of families I know that tell me like, you know, we started talking about the business so much that we stopped talking about other things that matter too. So that's another danger as well, that you say like, you know, you're putting the emotions so far out that all you can talk about is work, right? So that's what I meant when saying like, you know, just don't be delusional. I mean, you're not helping anyone with that. Like, you know, just be realistic, know that there's going to be emotions, and then confront them for what they are. Don't dissimulate them, but at the same time, don't let them take over, you know, either by oppressing them or by giving them too much reign. Right.
I think that's like an overcorrection in the academic world, you know, where there's in such a hurry to kind of shake the image that family businesses have of being quote unquote unprofessional, that they feel like they have to throw everything out the window, you know, if it's not, you know, something that you'd find in a corporate setting, but it's unrealistic, right? All right, so that was the 5 things you should know before joining your family business. If you know anyone who's about to join their family business and you want to warn them or you want to prepare them, pass forward this podcast and have them take a listen, because I think it will be really helpful.